For years, I had believed that my family would be better off without me. I was so convinced by the lies that my mind told me that I believed it. I believed my husband would be better if he could find a different wife. I believed my children would be better off if they had a different mother. But I realized that those were lies and that it wasn't true. I didn't know a lot about bipolar disorder, and what I knew came from movies and television, and those are not flattering depictions of the disorder at all. So I remember feeling like I was broken. I remember feeling like nobody was going to want me. But I was also told by the doctor that all I needed to do was find the right combination of medications and I would be fine. And I latched onto that because I thought, okay, well, there's hope there. All I need to do is just find the right medicines and I'll be all right. And so over a decade following that, I actively tried to treat my bipolar disorder with medications. I tried going to therapy, and it was frustrating because the medications were not working. I didn't tolerate medication very well, and I had terrible side effects, and I suffered a lot for a really long time. And the things that I was learning in therapy weren't really helping because I didn't have any control over what was happening in my mind. It was very sick. And in 2002, I got married, and about a year later, I had my first baby, and I was really struggling. I started to feel like I was failing my children as a mother. I started to experience suicidal ideation. That, for me, looked like it started with nightmares. I used to have really bad nightmares about dying, and I would wake up in the morning just feeling horrible. And then over time, that turned into daydreams. I would imagine, like my mind would create images of things that would happen, my car getting in an accident or things like that. And at first I was really horrified by that. And then over time, I started to find some relief in it because I was suffering a lot. I exercised, I was trying to do the things that you're supposed to do to take care of yourself, but nothing was working. And I was just getting progressively worse. And then finally in 2008, a decade after I was initially diagnosed, was when I had a really bad breakdown and I ended up hospitalized. And during that year, I was hospitalized 3 different times in 2 different states. My first hospitalization was the longest. They did electroconvulsive therapy on me. I had my first psychotic episode. It was horrible. I was really suffering. And the doctor insisted on putting me on a medication that I'd had a bad reaction to before. And that precipitated my first attempt on my life. And the second one caused my second hospitalization. And that was not successful. And then the third hospitalization came after that. And I was just feeling hopeless. My family was suffering. I was suffering. And there didn't seem to be any hope. And I didn't know what to do. But I had a turning point that occurred when I was watching my daughter, not my youngest, but both of my children were playing one day. And I was watching them. And I had a really clear thought come to my mind that if I ever succeeded in taking my life, that it would ruin my daughter's life. She was 4 years old at the time. And as soon as that thought came into my mind, I knew it was true. I knew that if I was successful in taking my life, that my daughter would blame herself and it would ruin her life. And I remember being shocked by that because for years I had believed that my family would be better off without me. I was so convinced by the lies that my mind told me that I believed it. I believed my husband would be better if he could find a different wife. I believed my children would be better off if they had a different mother. But I realized that those were lies and that it wasn't true. And so from that point forward, I decided that I was never going to let those thoughts stay. I was never going to allow those thoughts to stay in my mind unchallenged. I hadn't told anybody before about those thoughts because I was so humiliated and embarrassed by them. And I didn't want people to know that I had those thoughts going through my mind. But I started to realize that those kinds of thoughts, if you let them stay, it's like having somebody in your home that wants to kill you. And if you let that person stay, they're going to eventually hurt you and maybe succeed. And so I realized that when I had those thoughts come into my head that I needed to ask for help. So for me, that was the first turning point. I felt like I was really trying to take care of myself before, but at this point, I was determined to survive. And at that point, during that time, I didn't think that there was any hope for anything more than just survival. I thought the best I was going to be able to get out of life was just learning how to suffer well with bipolar disorder. I didn't think there was anything better to hope for. And I didn't think that I had value in my own life, but I knew my children's lives had value and that their welfare had value. And I believed that if I could just survive for my kids, that maybe they could have a good life. And so for that next 2 years, I just kept trying. I kept going to the doctor's appointments. I kept taking the medications. Nothing was getting any better. And then in 2010 was when my doctor and I finally found the first piece, the first step for me on my road to wellness. It was the first thing that would help to start giving my brain what it needed to be balanced. And then over the following decade, I started to kind of piece together all the different pieces that were necessary to live well with bipolar disorder and learning how to use all those different tools together effectively. And over the past couple of years, I've gotten to a point where the only time I haven't had a manic episode since the last really bad manic episode was in 2008. I had a few smaller manic episodes after that, but I haven't had a true manic episode in over a decade. And the ones that I've had after that, the hypomania, has gotten less and less, and I haven't had an actual hypomanic episode since 2018 when we moved. The only thing that actually triggers hypomania in me anymore are moves, and I've actually been kind of curious to see if I could move again and not trigger a manic episode, a hypomanic episode, but I don't really want to move, so I'm not going to test that theory anytime soon. A couple of years ago, was when I decided to start my blog, My Upside of Down. And the reason that I decided to start it was because I got kind of frustrated all of a sudden thinking, why didn't somebody show me this plan in the first place? Like, none of the things that I do are unique. None of them are special. And why didn't somebody just give me this plan at the beginning? Why didn't my doctor say you have bipolar disorder and these are the steps that you're going to need to take in order to live well with it? And so I decided to start my blog to share what I've learned, to shorten the learning curve for other people. I kind of call it the map to wellness that I developed. I feel like I kind of had to figure out the way to get to wellness. And then I created a map to show to other people because I don't think that it should take 22 years to learn how to live well with bipolar. And you shouldn't feel like the best you can expect out of life is suffering well with it. I live a healthy, balanced, productive life with my bipolar disorder, and so can you. There's no reason for people to keep suffering with this disorder. There is a way to live well with it.